Welcome back to Whiskey Politics, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Linda Breakstone. Linda is a phenomenal person. She has substantial experience and has a lot of information that I'm happy to be talking about with her tonight. Going back 8 presidential elections, 16 presidential conventions. You were with KCBS, you were with KABC, the political reporter and editor, and the old Herald Examiner newspaper. So it's with your perspective that I'd love to talk a lot about what's just happened with this incredible craziness that we just saw with this election and the media and what we're seeing in the future. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Very much.
So I took my kids to the Reagan Library many times, and we've walked through Air Force One. You were on that plane. You were working on that plane.
Those little desks, we had our little typewriters. And you walk past the communications area now, you can't believe it was that,
Yeah, the technology has changed a lot.
Yeah,
it's changed a lot. And so has the media, and so has political reporting. Mm-hmm. You've been there at the forefront of some of the most incredible stories. Whether it was presidential elections, you were there during the O.J. Simpson trial and the L.A. riots and everything that happened during
Clinton's impeachment.
And the impeachment. And you were front and center right in the center of things there.
Yeah, it was.
From just from memory and your perspective, what was that like in Washington D.C. in your bureau?
The impeachment?
Yeah, the impeachment.
The impeachment was a culmination of a long haul of things, and I think the media and the impeachment is not like today. You would think the media would be against Clinton getting impeached, but they were kind of into it. It was a good story. And for them, it was kind of a cathartic. Finally got to the point where they were,
So when the House actually indicted President Clinton, was that a surprise to everybody? I mean, they voted for impeachment.
It really wasn't. There was a tiny bit, I would say it was 80% certain in the media's mind that was going to happen.
Okay.
20%. As soon as the Lewinsky thing came out, it was in January.
Right.
I remember, and it was... You saw all of a sudden Cokie Roberts and all the stalwart, more kind of liberal commentators just pounded Clinton out of the box, and so you knew it was going to hit.
Yeah.
When the whole media turns, you watch all the Sunday talk shows, and you can see which way it's going.
And yet at the same time, the whole idea of the vast right-wing conspiracy that Hillary Clinton, First Lady at the time, talked about. That was certainly carried. The media carried her water quite extensively.
Well, I don't think so. I think at the beginning they let her get away with it, but pretty quickly after that, it became clear that was wrong, and they laughed at her for that.
Okay.
Yeah, behind the scenes, they were all laughing.
So we go now forward to 2015, 2016, and it's 8 years after Obama. It's 16 years after the Clintons left office. From your perspective as a political reporter and an editor, did you believe what a lot of conservatives were saying about the bias in the media towards whoever the Democratic candidate was going to be this year or last year?
This year I saw it, but to take you back, my first full-time campaign, I covered Carter and Ford, but I was a little girl starting. My very first time, full-time, I mean traveling everywhere, was with the first Reagan campaign, so Carter-Reagan. And at the time, people made fun of Reagan, and I was from California, and I expected it because he's a celebrity, and he was a Bonzo, bedtime for Bonzo. That was And reporters would have TV parties and watch it. They always made fun of him, but I kind of thought that was that because of that whole thing. And then and then I was sent to D.C. to live for a while, and the re-election campaign against Mondale. That's when I noticed these reporters are kind of nuts. Is we were on the campaign trail. Remember, first it was Mondale, Gary Hart.
Right.
A lot of the reporters were actually pulling for Gary Hart.
Until he got in trouble.
No, he didn't get in trouble till.
Oh, that was the '84.
Yeah, 84. He wasn't in trouble yet.
Yeah, that's
but he was their guy. But then Mondale wins.
Okay.
But these reporters actually thought Mondale could have beat Reagan. And remember that very first debate where Mondale was very excited because Reagan acted tired and all of that, and so all of Washington was abuzz. And so I saw the bias there, but again, that was a very different bias than now. That was more, Reagan, Republican, and the actor, and they gave Nancy Reagan heck like you wouldn't believe. I mean, the woman would trip, and they would laugh their heads off. So there was a lot anti-Reagan there. And I thought maybe I wasn't cut out to be a reporter because they're all saying, Mondale could win. I'm thinking, I don't think so. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't get this stuff. And of course, Mondale won.
So on the inside of the newsroom, though, did you feel that there was a rooting for Mondale or whoever the
newsroom? No.
Okay.
These are the people on the campaign planes. This is the Boston Globe, the Associated Press, the New York Times.
The pool reporters.
The pool reporters, all of us that traveled night and day.
Right.
And we, of course, as you know, after a day of working, I was a newspaper reporter then.
Right.
So we all would drink together and we'd all have dinner together every night. And, so you heard it all. And they were all really very pro-Mondale. But it wasn't the kind of reporting that you see now where an event happens and they don't get the event right. Back in '84, they were pro-Mondale, but at least they were correct in their reporting.
So there was still journalistic integrity, even though they had their personal biases.
Correct.
Today, you don't.
They were still accurate.
You don't see that today.
No, in '84, the man I was dating was the Associated Press, one of their chief political reporters, Michael Shanahan, and so AP was the word, and I saw everything was there. No, everything was fine. I mean, they just personally kind of preferred Mondale over Reagan. But the reporting was straight on.
Okay. When did it start to shift?
The first time I saw it shift really was in 2008 with Hillary and Obama, actually. This is very interesting. This wasn't Democrat, Republican. This is the media wanting somebody or the other.
Democratic primary.
And I think I have formulated the opinion that the reporters were so sick of the Clintons, they didn't want another Clinton. But she was the only game in town. And when Obama came up, all of a sudden, here's this guy, he's bright, and they just went to the Obama side. There's a woman named Ann Lewis, who was one of Hillary's top aides at the time.
Barney Frank's sister.
Barney Frank's sister. And she would call me, and she was out of her mind. Oh, what are they doing? They're not. The way the Trump people would say now, that's the way Ann Lewis and Hillary were talking at the time. They're being inaccurate. They're misreporting things. What are they doing? What are they doing? I remember them screaming, we'll never talk to Chris Matthews again. And I told them, I said, now you know what it's like to be on the other side.
Right.
So I saw it then. I saw the media completely, and I never thought Obama could win back then. He was in the U.S. Senate for 2 years. What?
Well, Leonard Goldberg wrote a book. I think he called it A Slobbering Love Affair, and it was between the Obama press and the coverage. So
that's the first time I saw it be so.
You didn't see that in Gore v. Bush. You didn't see that before that with
not inaccurate reporting.
Okay, so it's inaccurate reporting. That's the difference now. The biases have always been there.
The biases have been there. The biases have gotten stronger and stronger, but depending on the candidate.
Okay.
Remember, Reagan was bedtime for Bonzo, Hollywood, California nutcase in their heads.
Right.
These people are all East Coast reporters.
So we have something newer now, which is somewhat of a new, and we've been talking about it for the past few weeks since the election, and that's the advent of what quote-unquote fake news. And if you go on social media, for example, if you go on Facebook, you will see people posting things from, it could be sounding like a real newspaper, but there's always a word off. And there's a random article that gets shared millions of times.
Now, I've been retired this presidential cycle, but which was great because I could sit back and really watch everything. And I went to TV, I found I had less and less time because you're always on the air, but I could really watch everything. And I think social media has such a huge role in this, huge role, because it's all out there. It's all out there, and that's where the fake news is coming from the social media.
Right.
I know a man who has a huge, very high IQ. He thinks Michelle Obama is a man. He does.
I've seen those pictures.
But he really does. And this is a saying, otherwise.
Yeah.
And I've said, no, it's not. You think it's nuts, but these people, like they were talking in the panels this week, this crazy stuff gets out there. And I think social media feeds it because people find like-minded souls out there as their social, media outlets. And they're talking to people who believe the same thing. And so it makes it stronger.
So you've got a friend with a high IQ. We've all got friends that are intelligent, and they're still sharing this stuff. And you look at it, and it just, The question is, do you try and correct everybody? I mean, it's almost like a
My
tidal
friends
wave.
call me craziness. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like,
Right.
yeah.
But you think that played a role in this last election?
The fake news?
Yeah.
Well, not the role you think it played.
I'm not suggesting
Because
that
Trump
it may or may
won.
not make a difference, but there was fake news on both sides.
There was. The Pizzagate thing they're talking about now with Hillary. I mean, that was a pretty serious thing, where somebody had said that pizza store in is it D.C.? I guess D.C. was really a front for her trafficking
I haven't
children
seen
or
that one
something
yet.
like that.
Yeah.
That's what she's talking about today.
Okay.
That there's a pizza store, and it was all on fake media that it was a front for child trafficking for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous.
I'm not
And
even-
while you may disagree
She was
with
talking
somebody's...
about. I mean, it's so bad.
But that's the problem. It's taking away from the real issues and the real policies.
Mm-hmm. That's
which,
what I saw a lot. They'd be talking about this silliness,
Right.
and it would take away from the real issues of how do you change Obamacare? How do you do all of these things he wants to do?
Which is the things that you talked about, or those types of things.
When I was a reporter, I would have to do huge,
Hard news.
30-inch stories on, really taking it apart and analyzing it and what it really means and what's really going to happen and what would you do if the stock market crashed? Remember Al Gore? There was it was always serious stuff we'd get into.
Right,
And they
right.
don't anymore.
So, one of the things that I've noticed as long as I've been watching news media, especially when it comes to politics, is the reliance, in my opinion, over-reliance on polling. They actually use polls on a daily basis as breaking news. Yeah. And there's 6-8 months of breaking news of here's are the polls for today.
Well, I think, too, the reporters don't understand the polls. Too many reporters, remember, polling is mathematical. Journalists are usually, they're not very good at math, to tell you the truth. Journalists are writers. It's that left side, right side brain thing.
Right.
Journalists are, right side brained writers, more or less.
Okay.
They don't balance their checkbooks. Polling is a very mathematical thing. And I see them all the time. This is great. They go on the air and they talk about a poll, and it's 2% difference. And so if Hillary's up, then she's ahead in the poll. If it's Trump 2% up, they say, oh, well, it's statistically tied.
Right.
They're always doing that. But they don't really understand. I was trying to explain to people, the polls of this particular election, everybody was solid 45% on each side. And it was that little middle. And it's like you're a person walking down the stairs holding a fishbowl, and that water is sloshing from side to side. So it was that, that 8% going shoo, shoo, and making it seem like these were drastic shifts, and they weren't. And a journalist who understood math should have said that, should have explained this is that middle shifting. It was very volatile back and forth and back and forth, and they should have put that into context. And also, a lot of the pollsters, polls only good as your polls modeling, how they model a poll.
Well, besides a couple, they all got it wrong this year.
They actually didn't. What they did wrong is they didn't factor in their modeling. Modeling is what you do after the poll and you smooth it. The 2% they needed to factor in of the people that were not telling you if they were voting for
Right.
Trump. Then there was another 2% of the likely voter model, because they do the likely voter thing. Well, Trump voters weren't likely voters. And when pollsters push to get who a likely voter is, I might ask you, who are you voting for? You say Trump, and you say, I'm really going to vote for him. And then I say, well, did you vote in the last presidential? And you say, no, but I'm going to vote this time. Well, did you vote in the one before that? Well, no. Well, your name gets thrown off the pile. So a lot of Trump people, that's 4%. The last polls were 3 and 4%. She was ahead. There you go. And she did beat him.
One of the
I mean,
things,
she beat him. Remember, there's a difference between
well,
polling for electoral college.
Okay, so let's just talk about that very briefly here, because I think there's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. The polling on a state-by-state basis, as opposed to a national basis, is completely different. And they're looking state by state for electoral votes, which is how you win a presidency. National vote doesn't count. It's a waste of money, quite frankly, because you've got significantly high populations in California, New York, Illinois, and those are going to be very, very deep blue states, and that's how they win the popular vote. But as you know, the electoral vote is how you win, and that represents everybody across the board. But my question for you is, in returning to the discussion about the media and the bias, one of the things that I heard, and I'm sure you've heard from friends and other folks that we've been speaking with, contributors and such, is that there is such a low level of trust now in the media, in the mainstream media.
That's been going on for quite a while.
It's been going on for a while. I remember it's got to be the early 90s, maybe when Bill Clinton won. I saw a bumper sticker on a guy's pickup truck. It said, "Don't believe the liberal media." Mm-hmm. So yes, absolutely, been going on for a long time. But I think it is now at a fever pitch.
This is different. This is
Tell me
cuckoo.
how.
It has fallen off the cliff. And I actually don't trust the media anymore. And I'm ashamed to say, frankly, when I meet new people, what I did for a living. I really am. Because this is nuts. They are not accurately reporting what happened. And you can see an event, and you see Fox, and you see MSNBC or CNN. And it's like you're in two different parallax worlds.
Right.
And I have never in my life seen that. And I will see news media organizations do one thing. A simple example. DNC fires its national chair the day before the convention. Fires her.
Right.
It's a story for a day and a half, and that's it. Now, if the Republicans, if Trump had fired the RNC director, it would have been the story that would have dominated the entire convention, and you know that.
Right.
Go to the Republican convention, what happens? Melania Trump gets messed up, and she,
That's
and again, you got to understand, that's great video. So we can't not use that. So it's going to be used more because you got the video of her and Mr. But that was the lead of the story. It dominated the entire convention.
Yeah.
And if that had been the case, reverse it, it would have been barely a blip.
So
and that's where the out of context and the double standard.
Yeah, and what you just said, it's the out of context. It's what is not just being reported, but it's what is not being reported.
Mm-hmm. Look at Donna Brazile, the Donna Brazile thing.
DNC.
Megyn Kelly had her, got her stuttering and stammering. That comes out. It is barely talked about on CNN and MSNBC. I mean, barely. And I'm at home. I get to watch everything. Barely discussed. That's insane.
Right.
That's a DNC member leaking questions.
Right.
That's huge. If that had happened on the other side, and I don't mean to be an apologist for Trump here, but if that had happened on the other side, oh my God, they would have insisted on Trump dropping out.
Yeah, and there would have been hearings. Last question for you. We've gotten to a point, 2016. Now everybody's talking about the 2018 elections coming up. It looks favorable for Republicans, but who knows what happens in the next 2 years? And then obviously 2020. There's always another election. But with the level of distrust in the media right now, do you see it bouncing back, or do you think it just gets...
I'm glad you asked that.
Please.
I do see it bouncing back.
How so?
The real problem is, where are the editors? Newspaper reporting or in TV.
What you used to do.
The bosses. If I had ever written a story that was so biased as we have seen, I would probably have been fired, number one. But you have editors. My copy was reviewed by 2 or 3 people before it made the newspapers. You have editors that change these things. You have editors that make assignments. You have editors that say, "Oh, Linda can't cover that; she's too biased," or "George can't cover that." They take them off. I've seen my colleagues taken off the campaign because they've been too biased. That's where the problem is. These people in control aren't in control, and it seems that I don't know if they've encouraged, or you've seen the New York Times. They said it's our job to make sure Trump doesn't get in and this kind of stuff. I think they're going to take such a hit. They're going to have to come back. They will. In this immediate aftermath, there was a great mea culpa, actually, Chuck Todd from Meet the Press, where they talked about how they did the polls, and the polls of the college-educated people versus the non-college-educated people, and they would say, well, Hillary is supported by the college, the smart people, and Trump's supported by the stupid people, and they made that clear. Chuck Todd, after the campaign, said, if my father were alive, I go back, he would have killed me for doing that. He would have kicked my, and they're realizing that they had that kind of bias. But it's like these people got rabid. I have never, David, never seen this level of bias in my life. I don't even...
Well,
I do think it comes back.
I think everybody that's listening and watching this would agree with you. I would love to have you back, maybe on another podcast at Whiskey Politics, because this is a fascinating subject, and you've got such an incredible wealth of history and knowledge.
And John Glenn, I travel with John Glenn.
Oh my
great
goodness.
John Glenn stories.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
all these things.
Well,
There's
thoughts
some
and
fun
prayers to
stuff.
him and his family.
But the bottom line is, people, as I saw it continue, the bad reporting, worse and worse. I think that helped Bill. What's his name? What's his name? The president. I think that helped Trump because
Right.
regular people got so mad.
Right.
And I remember telling the television, "Keep it up, guys. Keep it up. You're going to elect the guy."
Linda Breakstone, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
look forward
My
to having you
pleasure.
back.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.